everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our virtual wild encounter. My name is Jenny and I am here with a very special friend. This is Monty the ball python. Now Monty has been with the zoo since 1993. She is about 27 years old. So she definitely has outlived most of her wild counterparts. Ball pythons in the wild typically only live about 10 years. In zoos they can live more like 20 to 30, and there has even been one who's been known to live to 45 years. In the wild, though, these guys live in sub-Saharan Africa in the savannas and grasslands, and there they spend most of their time under the ground. They're what we would call semi-fossorial. A fossorial animal is one that spends almost all of its time underground, and they live in burrows. They actually do not make these burrows themselves. They generally steal them from other animals like small mammals, and they spend most of the day during there. They will come out at night usually because they are either nocturnal or crepuscular most of the time. Nocturnal means they spend most of their time being active at night, and crepuscular means being active around dawn and dusk. So because this is when they come out, they don't really rely on eyesight. They don't have very good eyesight, but they have some other really cool senses. You might see her sticking out her tongue a little bit, and this is actually how she smells. So all snakes smell with their tongues. They have really cool, what we would call vomeronasal organs, and that's what they activate when they stick out their tongue. They do have this forked tongue, and that helps them tell if what they're smelling is coming from the left or the right. You might be able to see a little bit closer here. They also have some really cool features on their face. You might see they have kind of a pit on the front of their face, and these pits are what they use to sense body heat. That's a big way of how they hunt, is they can actually sense the body heat of the animals they are hunting. So when they do catch the animals they are trying to hunt, these guys are constrictors, and constricting means that they will wrap themselves really tightly around their prey to kill them before eating them. Most of the time their prey, again, is small mammals, and that's what she eats here. She mostly eats pretty large rats. All right, we're going to see if anyone has any questions yet about Monty the ball python.
Well, let's see. We've got plenty of comments.
All right.
Well, we do have a question here from Christina. She is 27. Wow. How long can she live for?
Yeah, so the most that ever one has lived has been about 45 years in a zoo. So hopefully she does have a little bit longer to stay with us.
Let's check across our streams here. I saw someone saying some technical difficulties on Twitter. I'm glad it worked out for you. A lot of people just saying thanks for doing this. Someone wants to comment on the name, best python name ever.
It's a pretty good name, yeah, definitely a reference to Monty Python. You might also be able to see on this camera, you can get a good close-up of her scale pattern. These guys are known for a really cool pattern that sometimes looks a little bit like an alien face or a ghost face. Yeah, some of these little patterns here look like a little face with two eyes. Of course, this is camouflage for them. This is a natural pattern that they have that helps them blend in the grasslands where they live. But also, they have been known to have a lot of other patterns in captivity because these guys are pretty common pets. A lot of times, if you know people with pet snakes, it'll be one of these guys because they are so friendly and laid back, and they have a lot of what we would call morphs in the pet trade. So they breed them to have different kind of cool patterns that they wouldn't see in the wild.
Okay, at RylanH88 through Twitter wants to know, what's the maximum size that Monty will grow?
So she's definitely full grown, and she is about 4 feet long. Ball pythons can get a little bit bigger. They have been known to get up to maybe about 5 feet, but that's pretty rare. They are pretty small pythons. They're one of the smaller python species, and they don't typically weigh more than about 4 or 5 pounds. She weighs just a little under 4 pounds.
And Caitlin and Ian want to know, was she born at Memphis Zoo, and can she lay eggs?
So she wasn't born here. I think she actually came from a captive breeder, since these guys are pretty common pets. And again, that was in 1993. And they do lay eggs, yes. They actually have some really cool adaptations for the way that they incubate their eggs. These guys will wrap themselves really tightly around their eggs. They usually lay about 4 to 12 at one time, and they will actually spend 3 months wrapped very, very tightly around them. And during that time, they never do anything else. They don't go and eat, and they just take care of their eggs until they're incubated and ready to hatch.
Well, all right. Lily and Claire, I would like to know, why do they shed their skin?
That's a great question. So all animals that are reptiles like this do shed their skin, and they do it usually every few months. And that's because they just don't have the same kind of skin that we do. Of course, they have scales, and we have skin that actually is constantly shedding, but it's in very, very small pieces, and you don't see it very closely. These guys, instead, they shed all at once. So when they are ready to shed, they turn, we call it opaque sometimes, because their eyes will turn blue, and that means that they are ready to shed. They do have a scale over their eyes, which is why their eyes will turn blue, and then they will slowly sort of wriggle out of their skin, and they will make a snake shed that is an exact replica of their outer scales.
All right. Amelia, 13, and Freeman, 11.
Hi, guys.
They want to know if Monty can swim, and if so, how long can she hold her breath?
That's a great question. Ball pythons have been known to be around or in the water. They don't swim very well. They mostly would soak themselves in the water because that can be very helpful for them. It helps them shed to be able to get that moisture. They can hold their breath for probably a little bit longer than we do, but just a few minutes.
We have a fun one here. Apparently we got a little family eating some lunch while watching.
Oh, hey guys.
They want to know what's Monty's favorite food.
So her favorite food is definitely a large rat. She likes to eat rats that are heated up. So we do have frozen and thawed rats, but if we get them nice and warm for her, she definitely appreciates that, because in the wild they mostly eat warm-blooded prey. And she likes rats that are dark colored. For whatever reason, she does prefer those.
Okay. Well, that sounds really appetizing.
Yeah.
Aubrey, age 4. All right. Little tiny thing, loving reptiles.
Hey.
She wants to know, do they have sharp teeth?
So they do. They don't have fangs because they are constrictors and they're not venomous. So only venomous snakes have fangs, but they do have teeth. They have generally about 25 to 35 recurved teeth, which means that they curve inwards. You won't see them very closely unless they open their mouth, and they don't tend to open their mouth unless they're getting ready to eat or if they feel threatened, or occasionally you'll see them yawn. But they do have those little teeth sort of lining the inside of their mouth, and they will use those to hold onto their prey until they can constrict and kill them.
We got a question for you, Jenny, from Anna Claire, age
Hi.
10. She wants to know, have you ever been bitten by a snake?
I have not been bitten by a snake. Luckily, our snakes are ambassador animals, and they are very used to being around people. So we know them very well. We can read their body language pretty well and know if they're starting to feel uncomfortable. And anytime they're starting to feel uncomfortable, we won't try to take them out or handle them because we want them to be comfortable. And that's the best way to avoid getting bitten by any animals, just to read their body language. Of course, in the wild, you will not want to come up to any snake, even if it is a non-dangerous, non-venomous snake. Leaving animals alone in the wild is always the best thing to do, and in fact, most people who do end up getting bitten by snakes are either trying to remove them or kill them. So it is a lot safer just to leave animals like this alone in the wild.
All right, Jenny, might want to do our introduction one more time. Got a lot of questions on what kind of snake Monty is, her name, her weight, and what does she eat?
Yeah, hi guys. So if you're just tuning in, this is Monty. She is a 27 to 30-year-old ball python. She's been with the Memphis Zoo since 1993. This species lives in sub-Saharan, usually Western Africa, in the grasslands, and they spend most of their time underground in burrows. Ball pythons are also very popular pets, so if you know people with pet snake, there's a very good chance it's one of these guys. They are very docile, very friendly snakes, and they have been bred to have many different cool patterns. Yeah. Again, if you are just tuning in now, I can talk a little bit about some of the adaptations that Monty has. When she wants to sense prey, she will either stick out her tongue, which is forked, and it can smell whether the prey is coming from the left or the right. And she does also have pits on her face. These little holes in the front of her face are heat-sensing pits, so she can actually kind of see the body heat of the animals that she is hunting.
Oh, here's a fun one that everyone likes to ask. Lily wants to know, who is Monty's favorite zookeeper?
You know, I would like to think that it's me, but it's hard to say exactly. She likes a lot of people. Luckily, she is very, very calm around people. And a lot of time when we take her out for programs like this, she will actually just go to sleep in our arms because she is very comfortable around us.
And Rebecca would like to know, is she a picky eater?
She is actually a little bit of a picky eater as far as snakes go. Most of our snakes will eat pretty much any rat that we give them, but Monty definitely likes to have hers heated up nice and warm, and she likes ones that are dark in color as opposed to light in color.
So Liam, age 9, would like to know, do snakes like to be held?
So usually snakes do not like to be held. Wild animals don't like to be held in general if they are in the wild, because they don't feel that comfortable not being fully supported and not knowing who's holding them. So luckily Monty is very used to us, and I think she does like to be held by us because she gets to share some of our body heat. They are what we would call ectothermic animals, which is another way of saying cold-blooded. So they don't produce their own body heat, and they have to rely on the outside conditions to stay warm. So she can actually stay nice and cozy being held. But of course, if she were a completely wild animal, she would not like it at all.
So we have a couple, segue here, another question for you. Sally wants to know if we have any red pythons, or what is your favorite color of the pythons from the lunch family?
That's a good question. So ball pythons like this definitely can have several different colors that are pretty popular in the pet trade. So they actually have been bred to be yellow sometimes. They'll be albino and be completely white. And there are some versions that are the same color as this but kind of muted down, so like mixed with white. Personally, I definitely prefer the natural color of the ball python because I think they are very, very beautiful animals the way that they are in nature.
Someone does want to know, where did we get Monty from? Was she wild caught?
So I believe she was captive bred. These animals are very commonly found captive bred, luckily, because they are popular pets. Anytime that you get a pet who is an exotic animal, I would recommend always getting a captive bred animal for two major reasons. One is that you know more what you're getting into with a captive bred animal. They tend to be a little bit friendlier because they weren't born in the wild. And also it's just much better for natural environments not to take wild animals out of them.
Oh, looks like you have a fan here, Monty. Lily says she loves your pattern.
Hi, Lily. Thank you.
How sweet is that? We're still getting some questions about Mac's size and what she eats. Let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so she's about 4 feet. Ball pythons don't tend to get more than about 5 feet. They're not very big pythons. Of course, the biggest snake in the world is a python. It's a reticulated python, and they're very, very significantly bigger than her. She's a nice, very small one, and she eats mostly rodents. So here at the zoo, she eats frozen and thawed rodents, and this is always what we would suggest for people who are going to have pet snakes or just other snakes kept under human care, because feeding them live rodents can be dangerous. Sometimes rodents will actually injure them. In the wild, though, she would typically eat a lot of rodents, and she would also sometimes eat some birds and some small reptiles, like maybe some small lizards.
Was another fun one from you, from our friend Max. Question for Jenny: who is the coolest coworker?
I'm gonna have to say my coworker Max. He's very cool. Thanks, Max.
And why do snakes like to eat animals? Ellie, age 6.
So snakes are carnivores. Carnivores are animals that only eat meat. So they don't really have any choice. They are evolved to only eat animals. And these guys are one of the animals that almost never adapt their circumstances in captivity to eat just meat. They eat entire animals because they are very well adapted to eat animals whole. They don't ever chew them apart. They just swallow animals whole, and that's basically what they're adapted to do.
All right, and I do apologize because these questions pop in so fast. We're just trying to keep up. We did have a little 3-year-old. I missed the name, but they want to know, does Monty have a nose?
So you could say she has a nose. She does have nostrils. Obviously, her nose is not quite like ours. What we would actually call the end of her face here is a rostrum. But yes, she does have those nostrils, and she breathes through them, but she smells with her tongue instead.
That is very cool. Let's see. So we're getting a lot of questions about how often Monty is fed.
So Monty gets offered food once every 2 weeks. She doesn't always take it, but she does sometimes. These guys don't need to eat nearly as often as we do. Being cold-blooded or ectothermic animals, they don't produce body heat. The reason that we eat as much as we do is mostly because it takes a lot of energy to be able to produce our own body heat. So because these animals get that from the outside environment, they will like bask in the sun, or they will go down in the ground to stay cooler. They don't need to eat a lot.
All right, Gavin, age 8. Is she a fast snake?
She could be a bit of a fast snake. She is not typically, because again, she is pretty comfortable being out and being around people. So she doesn't feel like she has to get away or has to be aggressive. But she can strike animals pretty quickly. So if she gets fed a rat, she can move pretty quickly to grab it.
Well, our friend Alexander here wants to know, can you tell me what you do with her?
Yeah, so we do a lot of things with Monty. She is one of our ambassador animals, and that means that she comes out to programs like this. She comes out to programs throughout the zoo. So when we are open during the day, we have a lot of animal encounters in different parts of the zoo throughout the day. And Monty gets to meet a lot of people and represent her species and snakes in general. Now, a lot of people just don't have great opinions of snakes, which I think is too bad, because snakes are really, really cool animals. And a lot of times they get a bad reputation. People think that they're dangerous when they're really not that dangerous. So I think Monty really helps to show that off, because she is such a friendly, cute snake.
And of course, we're getting back to that portion. We're getting questions more for you, Jenny. They want to know where Monty lives. Why do you want to become a zookeeper? Just overall interp breakdown.
Awesome. So Monty lives, she doesn't live on exhibit. She lives in our animal holding for our ambassador animals. So she has a big enclosure behind the scenes. And yes, so being one of our ambassador animals, we do take her out very frequently for programs like this. So I'm an animal interpreter, and I work with our education animals. We do their daily care, which is called husbandry. Husbandry is a word for the daily care of animals. And we also take them out for educational programs like this. And we always try to tie in some conservation messaging with them. So with Monty, so these guys are not threatened in the wild currently, but they used to be harvested pretty often for the pet trade. And that does still apply to a lot of animals today, a lot of animals that are kept as exotic pets. So which is why we would always recommend to get captive bred animals if you do want an exotic pet like this. And to keep in mind that exotic pets are not easy to take care of. Even though they can be rewarding pets, you have to know exactly what you're getting into, do a lot of research, and usually it's a pretty hefty monetary investment.
All right, guys. Hope that answers all those wonderful questions. Gage Horn, 4 years old, wants to know, can you stretch Monty out across the table so I can see how long she is, please?
So actually, we're just going to let her move the way that she wants to right now. We practice what we call choice and control with our animals. She is starting to actually straighten out a little bit, so you can see some of her pattern. But we don't want to force her to move in a way that she doesn't want to move, because we want her to be comfortable, and we want her to like coming out to programs like this. So we let her do what she wants to do. And right now, she wants to explore this table a little bit. But you can see more of her pattern now. If you were here earlier, I did say that they have a really cool pattern. In some places, it looks a little bit like alien faces. So like this one right here kind of looks like 2 eyes on a little alien face.
We've got a friend here on YouTube. I'm not going to try to butcher that sweet name, but they want to know, how can you tell if it's a boy or a girl?
So one of the ways to tell is actually by their tail size relative to their body. So they do have a body that is distinct from their tail, but it is hard to tell. If you turn them over, you can tell a little bit more, but again, we don't want to turn her over because she is more comfortable like this. But the females have a different ratio of tail size to body than males do. It is one of the ways to tell. They're pretty hard to tell apart just from looking at them. They are pretty much what we would call sexually monomorphic animals, apart from that tail size difference. And that means that the males and females of the species look just about identical.
Okay. We want to know, Rhonda would like to know, can you tell us anything about the shedding process?
Yeah, so during the shedding process, they become a lot less active when they're about to go into the shed. And then the top layer of their scales will turn, we call it opaque. It will start to separate from the other layers of their scales while the new ones come in underneath. And their eyes will turn blue because they do have a clear scale over their eyes. And during this time, it's important for them to be nice and moist. It does take a lot of humidity to shed properly. And they can spend anywhere from a few days to maybe a week being opaque before they finally shed that skin off. And they basically wriggle out of it. If they have things like rocks or stumps around, those can help them to sort of work their way out of the skin by rubbing up against them. But usually they'll come off in one big piece. It's a very exhausting process for them, so it does take a lot of energy, and they're pretty tired afterwards.
And Samuel, age 12, wants to know, does she get a new pattern of skin every time she sheds?
So no, they actually do have the same pattern every time that they shed. It's just that outer layer of skin, so the pigment that is the color of their skin is underneath and stays the same.
We've got some more kids just joining in, like little Ivy, age 6, and they just want to know the basic information again of who she is, what she is, how long, how much she weighs, all the good stuff.
Yeah, so this is Monty. She is a ball python. She's been with us for 27 years, since 1993, so she is about 30. And she is a fully grown ball python. She is about 4 feet. Ball pythons can get up to about 5 feet. They can also get up to about 5 pounds, and she's a little under 4 pounds. Of course, she is done growing, but other ball pythons, just depending on the individual, can get bigger. They do live in sub-Saharan Africa, and they spend most of their time in grasslands, and there they spend most of their time underground. They are semi-fossorial, meaning they spend a lot of their time underground, and they usually repurpose burrows from small mammals there. And they are nocturnal usually, sometimes crepuscular, meaning they either are most active at night or at dawn and dusk. They are constricting animals. That's how they kill their prey. So they are not venomous, and they really don't pose any threat to people.
Well, you've got a little fan here, Lizzie,
Hi.
age 9.
Hi, Lizzie.
She said, her comment was, she is adorable. I'm going to assume she's talking about Monty.
I agree.
But it does kind of lead into a fun story here that I first heard about Monty, how she's very distinguishable from other snakes.
She is, yeah. So Monty actually has one eye. That's one thing you can probably tell. Yeah, that is the side where her eye is missing. And she's been missing an eye for a very, very long time. Many years ago, it actually got infected when she had what we call a stuck shed. So this can happen a lot with snakes. Sometimes little pieces, little scales in their shed become stuck, and this one got infected, and unfortunately her eye did have to be removed. Fortunately, that was a long time ago, and she's very used to getting around without that eye. And again, her other senses are stronger, like her heat sensing pits and her vomeronasal organ that she smells with, so she can still, find her way around very easily.
And Grayson, a question for you, Jenny, wants to know, do you have a pet snake at home?
I don't have a pet snake at home. I do have several pets. I actually have a pet mouse, so my mouse might be a little bit offended if I brought home an animal that eats mice, but they are really, really great animals. I would like to have a pet snake someday.
And Dominic, age 5, wants to know, did she bite you?
No, she's never bitten a person before. Again, she is very comfortable around people. And all of our ambassador animals, we know them pretty well. We know their body language pretty well. So if they were starting to feel uncomfortable, we would know to just give them some space and leave them alone. So we haven't been bitten by any of our snakes.
We have more questions here, just kind of coming the same stuff we've already been talking about. What does she like to eat? Favorite food? If you want to go over some of that again.
Yeah, so she pretty much exclusively eats rats. She does eat frozen and thawed rats here, and that is what we suggest for snakes that we keep under human care, eating already dead rats, because unfortunately when you feed them live rats can attack and hurt snakes. So she eats rats. Her favorite ones are actually heated up so they get nice and warm, and she can use her heat sensing pits to see where they are, and she prefers dark rats. We don't know exactly why, but she does have a preference.
Let's see, Lily age 10 wants to know, where can they be found in the wild?
So they are found through a large area of sub-Saharan Africa in the grasslands there. It's usually more of the central and western part of the continent.
Oh, I've got some friends on, let's see, Twitter here at drawing12,000. Hola, ¿cómo está?
Hi, doing well, thanks.
Let's see, we've got some more friends coming in. Has she ever or will she ever have babies?
So she has not ever had babies, and she won't, because we don't breed our ambassador animals. They are specifically here to help us with education, and she's not an endangered animal, so she's not part of an SSP. So many of our animals that are in other departments are part of species survival plans, or SSPs, and those are usually endangered animals where it's very important to build up their populations. So luckily, since these animals are really common in the pet trade, there's really no need for us to breed her.
We are getting a lot of questions. I'm not sure if we can totally answer this one, but they'd like to know how many snakes we have.
That is a great question. I honestly have no idea how many snakes we have. We have snakes in a few different areas. Of course, we have a lot of snakes in our herpetarium, and we have some ambassador snakes like this. So we have about 7 ambassador snakes.
That works for me. I got another friend here on Twitter wants to know, what is Monty like?
Monty is a great snake. She's very friendly. As you can probably tell, she tends to feel very comfortable around people. And since she is an older snake, she likes to spend a lot of her time resting. When we take her out for programs, a lot of times she'll just kind of curl up comfortably in our arms and go to sleep.
And we do have some friends talking about our little story about her one eye. They want to know what color is the other eye and what color are typically snake eyes.
Yeah, so snake eyes, they can be a couple different colors. Usually they're pretty dark, so it can be hard to see where the pupil is. I don't know if I can get her a little closer to this camera. But anyway, she has some vertical pupils, which is how you can tell she's a nocturnal animal. Snakes that are nocturnal tend to have the vertical pupils. Snakes that are diurnal or awake during the day tend to have round pupils. But they're pretty much like a very dark brown color, very, very close to the color of her pupil. If you can see a little closer. Yeah.
Okay, guys, on Twitter, I do apologize, but I only know Spanish and English, so anything else you send, I have to type it and translate. So we're gonna miss a few questions on there. We do have a friend on YouTube who wants to know, will she ever change colors?
So she won't. Sometimes there are very, very subtle differences in color as snakes get older and as they shed more times. But no, this is the pattern that she's had for most of her life and that she will have for the rest of her life.
All right, we're going to test your knowledge here, Jenny. They want to know, what are the other 7 ambassador snakes?
So we have a Mexican burrowing snake. We have a bull snake. We have another ball python. We have an albino gray rat snake. And yeah, I think that's it.
All right, we got another fun one here. How can you tell the difference between a poisonous snake and one that is not poisonous?
That's a good question. Actually, the answer is a little more complicated. There's no such thing as a poisonous snake. There are venomous snakes. So the difference between poisonous and venomous, animals that you eat and become sick if you eat them are poisonous. Animals that bite you and you become sick are venomous. So there are a lot of venomous snakes. There's not an easy way to tell them apart just from looking at them. There are some urban legends that you can tell from head shape, from pupil shape sometimes, but this is not actually true. The best thing to do is just to familiarize yourself with the venomous snakes that are native to your area. So around here in Memphis, if you're from here, Pretty much the only ones you're ever going to see are the cottonmouth and the copperhead. But regardless, we would always say if you see a snake in the wild, just treat it like it is a dangerous snake and just make sure to give it space. If you take 2 steps backwards from them, you are outside of any snake striking range and you can both just go on your own way.
And we have another little young one here, Daphne, age 5.
Hi.
Do snakes chew?
So they do not. Snakes swallow their prey whole. They do have teeth. So constrictors like this, she has teeth that she uses to grab onto her prey while she is constricting them. And animals that are venomous, snakes that are venomous, have fangs that they use to inject venom into their prey. But they do not use their teeth for chewing. They swallow their prey whole.
Let's see. Lisa wants to know, when people have pet snakes of this size, if they feel they can't handle them any longer, what's the best way to rehome them if no one else wants to take it?
So there are a few different ways to rehome a snake. Of course, we would say, like, if you are wanting to get a snake, definitely make sure that it's something that you're able to commit to. If it becomes an issue to where you really just can't anymore, there are different rescues you can contact. There are some different reptile rescues throughout the country. There's not a local reptile-specific rescue, so you can either contact one in a different state and bring your animal out there, or you can see if a rehabber of some kind around here is able to take them. But definitely the thing you never ever want to do is to put that animal into the wild, because if it is a snake that is not native to the area, either it will not do very well at all, it will die in the wild, or sometimes they actually become invasive animals in the wild. And that has happened with the Burmese python in Florida. The Burmese python, of course, is native to Burma, not to Florida, but they have actually established a population in Florida that's damaging to native wildlife, and they all came from pets that were released into the wild when the owners didn't feel they could take care of them anymore.
Oh goodness, we got an interesting one. Amelia, age 13.
Hi.
She wants to know, has Monty ever swallowed anything she wasn't supposed to?
Monty has not swallowed anything she wasn't supposed to. Luckily, these guys are pretty smart. They don't tend to try to swallow anything that isn't food. And of course, they have different ways of telling if something is food. When we do heat up her rats, that helps her know that it is an animal she's supposed to eat. And of course, she does have a very sophisticated sense of smell, so she can tell if something smells like food or not. So she's never tried to eat anything that wasn't food.
Oh, that's good to hear. Good job, Monty. We had some questions popping up from Gavin and a few others about her being aerodynamic.
That's a good question. She does burrow sometimes, and she is a shape that kind of helps her to burrow a little bit. She starts out a little bit smaller at the top and gets a little bit wider as she goes down, and that does actually help her burrow through the ground a little bit. So you can say she's aerodynamic in that way.
Okay. And we were having some friends ask, does she ever eat anything besides rats? Is she omnivore, carnivore?
She is a carnivore. All snakes are carnivores. Sometimes there are some species of snake that will eat eggs as well as animals that aren't in eggs anymore. But these guys will not ever really do that. She only eats meat, and she only really eats rodents here. We've never offered her anything that isn't a rodent.
Okay. And David wanted to know, are the snakes most vulnerable when they are shedding?
Yes, that is a great question. In the wild, they would always make sure that they are safe in their burrows when they're shedding, because they are very vulnerable. It takes a lot of energy to shed, and it takes a lot out of them. So if a predator were to find them while they were shedding, they wouldn't be able to defend themselves very easily. They do also become more aggressive when they're shedding. So if you know someone who has a pet snake and it's shedding, they tend to leave them alone during that time because they are feeling more vulnerable and more easily threatened.
We do have some shout outs for you, Miss Jenny. We've got, wow, very informative.
Hi, thank you.
Hello from Minnesota.
Hi, thanks for tuning in today.
And of course, Troy says, this is really cool.
Thank you. I think Monty is a really, really cool snake, and she represents snakes very well.
I think also, as we seen some of these questions, you might want to go through the intro just one more time.
Okay. So for anyone who has tuned in pretty recently, this is Monty, and she is a ball python who has been with the Memphis Zoo since 1993, 27 years. So she is very comfortable around people. She is one of our ambassador animals that we use for programs like this virtual wild encounter. In the wild, ball pythons live in sub-Saharan Africa, in the grasslands, and they spend most of their time underground in burrows. They are nocturnal, they'll come out at night, and that's when they do most of their hunting, and they mostly hunt rodents. And they do have really cool senses for that. They don't see very well, but they use their tongue to smell, so they can smell their prey, and they also have pits on their face that sense heat.
And we are starting to get a lot of questions about, speaking of heat, how does she ever get cold? What kind of temperature do you keep her terrarium where she lives in?
Yeah, if you didn't see just now, she did yawn, which you don't see all the time, which is really cool. It gets us a cool inside look at her mouth. But yes, she lives in a terrarium with a heat lamp, and that heat lamp, there is a temperature gradient. And that's really important for pet snakes so that they can self-regulate their temperature. So her basking spot is the hottest spot, and that tends to be in the 90s, 90-something degrees. And then she has a cooler spot too, so she can cool off a little bit. And of course their moisture is very important. So we have pretty high humidity for her, usually at least about 45 or 50% humidity. And that helps her with her shedding and just making sure that she is in the right setting that she needs to be in.
And Augustus, age 5, would like to know, do you like being around other snakes?
Does she like, or do I like being around other snakes? I definitely like to be around snakes. She definitely doesn't. Snakes tend to be pretty solitary, and she would only be around other ball pythons when she was breeding. But I love to be around snakes. I think snakes are really great animals, and our ambassador snakes are really awesome. Of course, I don't really want to be around wild snakes because it is always best to leave wild animals like that alone.
All right, well, guys, we did try to get all your questions today. We're going to wrap this up, but I have a few comments for you, Jenny.
Right.
Ruth, age 7, says, this is really cool. I can't wait to share this with all my friends.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear it.
And one more for you, Lisa, just popped in. We appreciate you taking the time doing these videos. Give us a whole new respect for your job.
Of course. Thank you. I am always very glad to share about animals and to educate about what makes them so cool. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. We will be back tomorrow at 12:30 with another really cool ambassador animal to show you guys. Until then, have a great, wild, wonderful rest of your day.